Okay. So now that I start the recording, let's go ahead and get started here. Again, this is going to be a little bit longer, but hopefully it'll be more informative. So class one, definitely want to welcome you guys. Still, there should be some people coming in, so hopefully they come in. I just posted the website to the curriculum here. That's all that is. And so pre-work, you guys had 3 chapters of pre-work. Here's all the stuff that you guys came before Thursday knowing. You got a good introduction. You got how programs work. You got to get to code a little bit. You got to figure out how to code, how to do repositories, how to do all this stuff. And then, you know, there's no questions, right? That everything that you've done super basic. We can just move on, right?
No, absolutely not.
I'm pretty sure we can't. I've heard a lot in Discord. So I understand that. The biggest thing that you will learn is no matter how much you learn in this program, this course, when you get that first job as a software engineer, you will be what they call drinking from a fire hose. And this course is no different. You are going to get fed so much information, you're not expected to drink it all the first time you hear it. So I just want to put you at ease. Not everything you're supposed to just soak up. This is not traditional like high school where you have to learn it. The teacher only says it once and then you take a test and then you're graded at the end based on that. That is not this. We are trying to present information in a way that we, go back and forth. We ensure if you communicate with us, we ensure that you do understand things and you do complete this course. So completion of this course is 100% on you guys. You have to communicate. You have to be willing to just keep pushing, keep fighting, keep crawling until you do get it. And I promise you, for myself, I will do everything I can to ensure that you guys understand at least enough to pass the course. Again, there's so much stuff in technology. We will not be able to go over all of it, but I will try my best to tell you up front what you have to know and what, if you have time, you can go on your own and learn. So some of the things that I really focus on, I've been a teacher for a long time. My core kind of 5 things here for this course that I will try to incorporate throughout this course. First of all, I like to build confidence. If you don't think you can do something, you are setting yourself up to not be able to do it. Confidence is huge to me. Once you start believing at least that you can do it, then you're more willing and things come easier. I like to do things that are real world. There will be some things in LaunchCode that I will skim over because they are too much like me being in public high school again. And I'm like, I don't want to be there anymore. So I will try to focus more on the real world and try to get you those skills. I am a huge person about failing. Like you should mess up all the time through this course. If you aren't messing up enough, you're not pushing hard enough. So you should be failing, but you should do it what we call fast, meaning if you sit there and you're anxious about even starting something because you're like, I don't even know where to start. So I'm just not going to start. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to come back in. Oh, I still don't know where to start. I'm going to go somewhere else. No, you have to dig in. You have to start failing right away. You have to start getting frustrated because that's how you're going to get past everything and learn. So the faster you can start failing, the faster you'll start learning. Another key thing is networking. So the networking right now is between you guys. I need you guys to communicate with each other. I've seen some people going back and forth, but in the next couple of weeks, we need to really ramp this up so that you guys are helping each other, because without each other, you will not be able to do as well in this course. There's not enough of me. There's not enough of the assistants to be able to help every single person on everything they need. So I am strongly suggesting you guys set up study groups, set up times to meet, set up whenever, and help each other. The other thing is, some of you did comment on my shirt, rubber duck, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but being able to vocalize and express what you are wanting helps you. And that's the rubber duck principle that I will get to later. So what are we doing today? Class 1. Well, I'm going to re-go over all the course stuff. I'm going to overview, like, what are you expected to do? I'm going to overview the chapters 1 through 4, the content. I am going to be able to demo getting code from the LaunchCode. So the JavaScript project, I deleted my repository so that I could show you live how I would do that. And that whole entire step. So not just getting it from LaunchCode, but also completing a thing and then pushing it up to my repo. And then if I have time, which I hope I am, I'm going to actually show you a demo of a completed liftoff project so that you can see at the end of this course what you're going to be trying to do. And then I will talk about graded assignments because there is one coming up very soon. So don't worry about that yet. Let me explain it first before you start stressing. Okay. All right. What are we going to learn in this course? There are 3 units, and all 3 units are important. But to be honest, Unit 3 is the most important. But of course, we can't do Unit 3 until we do Unit 1 and 2. So Unit 3, I'm going to start with the most important, is liftoff. You guys are going to be split into groups and make group projects. And at that point, that's where you'll see me even nerd out more, where I'm going to start showing you how to do projects, how to do, Kanban boards, how to do all that real world stuff. Because if you go into a job and just do JavaScript, oh, well, everybody can do JavaScript. Can you work in a team? Can you communicate to your project manager? Can you look at business needs and turn them into code? That's what people care about. And that, whenever you go into an interview, is what you're going to have to talk about. So to be able to do those group projects, we are going to learn JavaScript and React, and we're going to learn Java. And there's a framework, Spring Boot, Spring Web, Spring Data, Spring, a lot of different Spring tools, configurations that we'll bring in. And then for our database, we're going to learn just enough MySQL to be able to put this all together. And of course, no matter what unit we're in, we will have the amazing opportunity to use Git and IDEs like VS Code we'll start off with, and then IntelliJ. Okay. So you want to see a finished liftoff project? We are definitely going to do that. I also have this little thing over here in case of fire, git commit, git push, and then just leave. That's how we kind of feel so far. All right, Unit 1. This is all of Unit 1, so it's just a title slide. We're going to learn some professional web development doing JavaScript. At the end of today, not the end of this week, not the end of whatever, if you can't do these things before you go, before you leave studio, we need to start talking because I don't want to get you behind. So the first thing that you need to be able to do is make comments in code and log to the console. Now, of course, there's tools that you guys have been struggling with, like with VS Code, to be able to do that. But I'm talking about the concept of, if I said, go comment this code and your VS Code was set up, could you do that? Could you log something to a console? Could you deal with variable types? Meaning, can you declare variables, assign variables, evaluate expressions, and then assign them to variables? Can you get user input? And then we're going to spend a lot of time on this with the forking, cloning, committing, pushing, all that kind of stuff. And the most important thing here is running code from LaunchCode, given examples using Node and npm install. So those are the things that I'm going to try my best to explain so that you guys are able to do these things before the end of studio. So chapter 1 was a nice introduction. I'm going to try to do these takeaways. I may or may not go in depth into these, but these are the key things that I want to refresh. And then these are the things that if you do have questions about these things after I talk about them, put them in the lecture chat so I know to go back over them. But you're supposed to be reading your textbook all the time. They give you due dates. You're supposed to do that between each class. Some people asked if you could work ahead. Absolutely, but don't. I would suggest not working too far ahead. And well, too far is probably about a week. So you could work on Thursdays and maybe, I guess we don't have class next Monday, but usually like 2 classes ahead is maybe okay. But if you get too much further than that, actually, I don't even think they're open. But if you get too much further than that and they're open, you'll probably forget some of the stuff whenever I go over lectures. So try to stay with us and maybe go more in depth on the exact concepts rather than going ahead. And then that goes with the exercises. You're supposed to be doing those. And again, my expectation is that you tried all the exercises before class. And today's going to be weird because I'm not going to go over a lot of examples today. But starting next class, I will be going over many of those examples. right in front of you so that you're more confident that you did the right exercises and you did them correctly. And then class and lecture, it's usually 5:30 to 7. Today I might be going a little bit longer. Well, we're gonna see how that goes, but we're probably gonna take an intermission and then go to 7:30-ish, and then break out to studio. And everybody should be able to get to their studio. I did hear a couple people posting on Discord that they weren't assigned groups, but we're still figuring those out, and we'll take care of you there before studio. You will have periodically graded assignments, which I'll talk about towards the end of class, because I'll have a real example of graded assignments. And then extra note grades. So grades weren't in there, but I wanted to speak about them. This is not a traditional school. You don't get an A, B, C, D, or F in this. You get, do we as LaunchCode teacher assistant feel like you have the necessary skills to move on, or do you not? And that's so wide open that stresses some people out. But I'm letting you know, as long as you're communicating, working hard, and doing all those things, you're going to be fine. I have not found a person that has communicated and working hard that has failed. I haven't met one yet. The people that get stressed and aren't willing to fail fast, and they're like, well, I'm going to wait till the last minute to do this because I'm really stressed out, and I'm going to wait till the last minute, and then by that point you are late on things. And I'm not talking about like an hour late, I'm talking about like way late, like you're getting way behind and now you struggle catching up. Those are the only people that do that. So again, do not worry about grades. Only worry about getting things done, understanding to a level that hopefully I help you set. Because I can say Node.js, and there's different levels that you have to understand about Node.js. So just don't worry about grades is my biggest thing. Just worry about trying hard. Because I am seeing a couple things there. The other thing about grades, I don't do anything with grades or attendance. So if you have an attendance problem, you're going to reach out to your instructional assistant and Jamarco about attendance. And then grades are going to be heavily dealt with on your instructional assistant. And that'll be that. If you get behind on some things, then that's where your instructional assistant will bring in Jamarco, and he's kind of like the principal, like he'll get onto you and make sure that things are doing fine. But I technically don't do anything administrative. I'm just here for the teaching, which I love. That's the reason I quit my own teaching, because I just want to deal with helping people and teaching. So don't worry about grades. If you have problems with grades or attendance, it's your instructional assistant. But again, communication is the biggest thing. All right. So I think chapter 1, there was no coding. It was just setting up expectations. So if you have any more questions about expectations, then you might post them in the lecture chat. Or to be honest, these are the things that I don't worry about. I don't think that you have to worry about all the itty bitty details. So maybe bring up those questions in your studio with your IAs. Right. So chapter 2, this is where we start actually getting into a little bit of fun. Chapter 2, we start with vocabulary. This is the first chapter that does vocabulary. Here is my insight on vocabulary. I will try my best to tell you, and you'll see a slide here in a little bit, of the vocabulary that you have to know. And then the vocabulary that is good for you to know, or if somebody else brings up, you're like, oh yeah, I heard about that. This is what I know about it. But you don't have to have it on the front part of your brain. So I'm going to try to do that for you. The reason we have vocabulary, though, if you are going to communicate with a coworker, you have to have a common language or vocabulary that you guys use to talk to each other. So you do need to understand enough of the vocabulary so that you can talk to then, when you're interviewing, know what they're talking about, and then once you get the job, be able to have conversations. Because there's nothing worse than you talking about one thing and your coworkers talking about a different thing, and all it is due to vocabulary. You're not using the right vocabulary. So that's my little sense on vocabulary. It did talk about programming languages. So programming languages like JavaScript and Java, and there's like Python are the kind of bigger ones. A language is just a way that whenever you type it up, there has to be a translator because your computer does not understand what that line of code does. So when you say console.log, your computer has no clue what that means. Your computer, meaning like your CPU, so your computer, your processing unit on your computer, it doesn't understand English, it doesn't understand vocabulary, it doesn't understand anything. All it understands is zeros and ones. And so we have slowly built on top of that, like assembly language and C and or C++ and or whatever. And then we have JavaScript. And we have all these languages that are built on each other so that we, as more educated, normal English speaking, we can program in these languages because we learn the syntax of that rather than having to learn, the zeros and ones to feed into the CPU for the computer to do what you need to do. So there's lots of programming languages. Each of them usually have their strengths and weaknesses. This is the chapter where you're supposed to have installed VS Code, installed Node.js, got your GitHub set up, all that kind of stuff. And the big thing was you got that first program hopefully running, but we'll show you that in a second. Vocabulary, the things that you have to know. If I say you need to write a program, you need to know that a program is a set of instructions for a computer to know kind of what to do. It's the bigger set of instructions, where algorithm is a set of instructions. So algorithm is like a task. If I want the computer to calculate my taxes this year, that's an algorithm. And I have to say, do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. So that's an algorithm. It's a set of instructions, where a program would be like TurboTax, which not only does this, but it does this other stuff, and it's a bigger set. Syntax is huge. It's kind of like the all the small stuff that makes the language specific stuff work. Such as in Python, you have to have indents. If you don't indent your lines, Python doesn't run. In Java, if you don't have a semicolon after an expression, it will not run. So there's certain syntax, like language specific things that you have to do. So whenever I say that's a syntax issue, that then helps you because you know what the vocabulary word of syntax means, that it's not a logical issue. It doesn't mean that you wrote the wrong line. It means that somewhere in that line, you forgot a parentheses or you forgot a comma or you forgot something. It's usually, when I say a syntax issue, it's not a logic issue. It's just like a minor language specific issue. And then IDE, that's integrated development environment, that's VS Code. So instead of you having to type everything and take out your notepad and write your JavaScript file in your notepad and then do everything in the terminal to get it to work, VS Code does a lot of that stuff for you. So you don't have to worry about that. So learning your IDE is just as important as learning how to code. I'm checking the chat just to make sure if there's anything. So the things that I'm going to just briefly go over these other ones. Binary are ones and zeros. Bi meaning two, either you have ones and zeros. That's the only way the computer can read things. So everything that we do is converted to binary. Well, another thing that they found out is if you take sections of the binary and complete them down, you can actually make hexadecimal, and it's a super fast conversion. If you're nerdy like me, there's an easy conversion there. That goes from hexadecimal to binary super fast. You need to know what hexadecimal kind of is, and when you see things such as colors, if you ever do like a color palette, there's like a six digit. It's actually like 3 hexadecimal numbers that represent the color. That's there, and then decimal is what we use. That's the base 10, and there's a conversion between all of these, but you do need to know what these are, but it's okay that you really don't know how they work or whatever else for what we are doing. Compiled and interpreted, these are the type of programming languages. JavaScript is interpreted. What that means is, as you say one line of code and it runs it, the interpreter is going to run just that one line of code and then tell your computer what that means. And then the next line, it's going to interpret the next line and tell your computer. And it goes line by line. Just like if you had an interpreter somewhere. Like if you're going to see a show, I know a decent amount about like ASL stuff. If I had an ASL interpreter up there, they don't have the thing and memorized or anything. They're hearing, and as the person is talking, they are interpreting. That's interpreted language. Compiled language, on the other hand, is like Java. Java will not let you run line by line. It says, hey, you have to write this whole entire program, and then I'm going to take this whole entire program and I'm going to compile it into more efficient code and then send it to the computer. So it's just, do I need to build it and compile it, or can I just hit run and it can just go line by itself? So again, you do not need to memorize that. I'm just explaining it. And then front end and back end, if I am able to demo this liftoff thing, I'll show you a little bit more about what that is. But most of the time, programs are separated in the front end, which is like the user interface, which is what you see in your browser. And then the back end is usually not run on your computer. It's ran somewhere else, and it's retrieving the information and sometimes doing a lot of computation behind the scenes that's not on your computer, it's somewhere else. And that goes along with client machine and web server. Your client machine is your computer. Whenever you open up google.com and you open up your browser is the client machine, and it can do certain things, but it can't do everything. It has to send a request to a web server, and that web server has to do some things and then send it back to you. But when it sends it back to your client machine, it sends it back hopefully in a way that your client machine understands what's going on, and they talk back and forth. Yeah, so the question about compile time and run time, you don't have to, JavaScript doesn't really have a compile time. It just does run time, where compiled languages, there is like, as it gets compiled, there might be an error. But then sometimes my Java will compile just fine, but then as it's running, it sees like a logical thing and it hits an error and it throws an error. So yeah, compile time is as it's getting built, runtime is as it's actually being ran. Okay. I'm going to go over this again. This is just a review. So the workflow recap out of the end of chapter 2, it said to read instructions. Those are super beneficial. You're supposed to open up your terminal and go to where you want the code to live. I am paraphrasing some of this, but this is what I like. So it says open terminal, but really what you're doing is you're trying to find out where do you want your repo to live in your terminal. You go to GitHub, you fork the repo or just clone it, depending on if you need to fork it or if it's your own repo. And once you clone it, you use the terminal to clone it down to your machine. You're going to use VS Code in that repo root directory. And then you're going to run npm install. You're going to write your code. You're going to run some code. You're going to push it up to GitHub by using those other commands. And you're going to verify in GitHub that it's there. Again, I'm going to show this here in just a second. Okay. Here's a visualization to the best of my ability. I made this just real quick. I'm using JavaScript projects repos. So these blue boxes are repos. And repos have code in them. I'm not saying what code yet. I'm just saying that they're code. So whenever you are given a new thing to do, which the graded assignment will be a new one, but your projects, like all of your examples and studios, LaunchCode put in just this one thing. It did not make one for each class. So once you have JavaScript project repo running locally and through your GitHub, you don't have to, all the examples and all the studio for unit 1 is in there. So you don't have to redo it. Technically, you can only fork once from a repo. So let's say I went to this JavaScript project on LaunchCode Education, that's their site, and I went fork and I forked it to my personal repo. When I do that, if I go back to LaunchCode Education and go to the fork, it'll say you've already forked. So you should only be able to fork a repo once. But see this dividing line here. The whole reason you fork, LaunchCode owns their own repo. They do not want you touching their repo. They don't want you pushing your code to their repo. Their repo is exactly how they want it. And if it's not, they want to make their own updates. They don't want you guys messing with it. So they want to keep that separate. So there's that dividing line. When you fork it, you are actually bringing it over to your personal GitHub repo. So everything you do is going to be on your personal GitHub repo. The only time you are going to see in your GitHub anything that deals with LaunchCode is whenever you are initially forking. Everything else on your terminal should have your whatever your personal thing. So like mine's CoolCat254, because you'll see that in a second. Everything there says my CoolCat254, because that's my username for my GitHub. So I think that's one easy separation. And once it's in my repo, you can ignore this other one. You'll never touch that other one again because it's in yours. Now, if you're talking about like open source projects, sometimes you'll want to fork, you want to do your things, make sure they're right, and then you'll send it back to them and say, hey, my thing's better. Go look at mine and see if you want to incorporate my changes. And you might want to do that. For LaunchCode, that's not going to happen. They're never going to look at your stuff. So don't ever try to go back to their thing. You're going to work on your machine and on your GitHub. So once you have it on your GitHub, this is where it gets a little confusing. GitHub is, and this is where I wrote these, it's called a remote or the origin, depending on where you see it at. It lives up there. So you can't mess, well, you can mess with it. I don't know if you've ever seen, you can actually go to a file, go up and hit edit, and you can edit right into GitHub. It'll let you. But when you do that, it's still living in GitHub. It's still living in the remote. That's usually not what we want to do. We want to pull it on our own machines and use VS Code so that it can help us and gives us little red squiggly lines to know if we're doing it right. So we want to bring it down to our own machine so that we can run it locally. So that's where it said here, locally. You want to run it locally. I think the confusing part for Moz is those are two different repos. They are linked, but they are two different repos. So if I do anything on my local, it does not automatically get sent up to my remote. They live separate. So anytime I do anything local, even when I commit, I think that's where a lot of people at the beginning get confused. Because whenever I commit, I say, I've made this amazing change, I'm going to commit it. It only commits it locally. You will not see your change up above. You will not see your change remote. You have to use that push command to get it up, or else it just lives locally. So you use the keyword clone to bring it down to your machine. And to be honest, I can copy and paste that thing wherever I want to. And I'll talk about that. And I'll actually show you some of that. But that's where when you clone it, it brings it down. When you push it back up. And for you guys right now, hopefully that's it. Once you clone it and get it set up in VS Code perfectly, you don't have to do too much about that. So I will. The other weird thing is I can clone it on my local, like in 3 different locations. So I can actually like go to my C drive. I'm a Windows guy only because my work does Windows. If my work did Mac, I'd be a Mac guy. I don't really care about which OS, but I'm more comfortable with Windows just because that's what my work is on. So on Windows, I have my C drive. I can put my clone on my C drive. I can go make another folder called LaunchCode and put it in LaunchCode. I can go to my user profile and put it in my user profile. I can actually clone it to multiple different locations, and all of those are separate repos. They are all still linked. So if I say push, they'll try to push up. But if I have different ones on my machine, and then I try to push this one, and then I make a different commit, and I try to push this other one, it'll not like it because it'll say, hey, there's something weird here. Like you're changing things from different places, and it doesn't always like that. So make sure that when you clone it, you know where you clone it at, which I'll talk about what I do, and then you only mess with that. Okay. I'm going to show you this first program, which was chapter 2. I'm going to show you exactly how I would do it. Now, here's the hard part. I am going to go a little fast. And also, I can make this screen kind of big so most of you can kind of see what's going on. Once I switch to my File Explorer on my local It's very hard for me to make it bigger. Once I get into VS Code, I know how to make that bigger, but some of this stuff, you're just going to have to trust me on what I'm doing. I am going to talk through it, so please pay attention. But we're gonna try to go through this. So I'm going to grab the starter code here in a second. I'm going to make sure that you guys know these commands. The ls means list, so it just lists everything where you're at. I did see an IA post, PWD, which is present working directory. That's sometimes nice. My terminal always has me there, so it always gives me my full line, where I think on Macs, it sometimes just gives you the file you're in. It doesn't give you everything before it. So you can use PWD if you need to, but then CD is change directory. So if I want to change what folder, I guess the other thing is, I'm assuming directory and folder mean the same thing. So if you didn't know that, directory, when I'm going to say directory because it's more of a professional thing that they say in computer science, but folder means the same thing. So directory and folder mean the same thing. So if I have, if I want to change my folder that I'm in, my directory, I'm going to do CD, and then I'm going to say go here. Because I'm on a Windows device, I don't use this MK directory, which is make directory. I just right click on where I want it, and I say make a new folder, because Windows calls them folders. So I just say make a new folder, so I never have to do the make directory command, but I do sometimes use the CD quite often, and sometimes I do use the ls. Those are my two most common ones. I'm going to show you how to fork and clone. I'm going to show you when to know when you need to run this npm install. I think that's a big key one that we are struggling with sometimes. So you don't always have to run it. I think that's also the other confusing part is I just made this thing work. I didn't have to run npm install. Then I go to this other thing and it won't work, but you have to run npm install. So I'm going to talk about that. And then also what the status really means, the add, the commit, the push. I'm just going to show those, and then GitHub Actions. I'm going to say my little tidbit here, and then I might state it again later, but GitHub Actions, many people got confused because your graded assignment 0 said, hey, whenever you push this up to GitHub, there's supposed to be like this little check mark that GitHub Actions runs, and it tests your stuff, and it makes sure that everything's good on by our standards. And then you guys did the exercises, and you're like, there's no check mark, there's no, all this stuff. Those GitHub Actions are only for graded assignments. So if you do not see graded assignment, if it's a studio or an exercise, you will not see GitHub Actions. You will not see any of that stuff. That's what I'm here for. I will go over and make sure that your exercises look good, meaning I will go over a couple of the harder ones every class so that you guys know that you're doing it right. That's where you talk to each other. Hey, I did this exercise. This is what I got. And that network on trying to figure that out. So I'm going to click on this, which will send me to LaunchCode starter code, and then I will show you on my own device what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do this twice technically, because I'm going to do it for the first program, and then I'm going to do it again for the JavaScript project repo as well. So you'll get to see this twice. That's why I'm going to go over it not super slow, because you'll see it again. So I'm going to click this link. It's going to take me to LaunchCode's JS Hello World. And I'm supposed to fork this thing. So in here, let's just look at a couple things. Your code is always here. If you ever click on these other ones, sometimes you'll get lost. GitHub is easy to get lost if you don't know where you're going. So always make sure you click this code if you ever click on anything else. The other thing I want to pull your attention to sometimes is pull request. As you can see, these people are trying to say, my code is good, launch code, why don't you take my code? And that's what pull requests are for. Pull requests are when you're collaborating. So I will talk about this topic again, but it won't be for a long time. It'll be when we get to our group project. But if you see pull requests, it's because there's like a branching or a forking or something that you're not quite doing right. So just ask once you get that, but I just wanted to point that out. So I have their code there, and this code lives there. If I go to this hello.js on their thing, right here's the pencil button. whenever I try to edit this, it says, hey, you need to fork this. They aren't allowing me to touch their stuff because it's theirs. And I don't want to touch their stuff. That's the whole reason we fork. Not clone, but fork. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to click this fork. If I already forked this, it would say right here, hey, do you want to go to your forked repository? And it would give me a link right here if you've already forked it. So some of you are worried about clicking things too many times, and that's a legitimate concern. Forking is not one of those. If you're like, I don't know if I forked this, just go up here and click the fork. And if you have, it'll go to yours. So you cannot have more than one fork. So I'm going to create this new fork. Now, what does this mean? So when I click here, it's going to say, hey, who's going to be the owner? Now, for you guys, you're probably the only ones, but if you look on mine, I have several different things, organizations or teams that I'm a part of. So I have different things, but where is this repo going to live? And I want it to live in my private repository, which is my Coolcat 254. And then I could keep their same repository name, or I could change it. It's up to me. I get control over that because once it comes into my repo, it's mine. It's still linked to their fork, but it's still like, I want you to treat this as this is your repo. You can mess this up as many times as you want to. Nobody else is going to see this besides whoever you share it to. So the repository, you can put a description. This thing, copy the main branch only. For most of the stuff that we are doing right now, this will not matter. But I'm going to show you what that means real quick. Not only can we have, do they not have branches? Ooh, they're so smart. I'll show you this in a different repo. But not only, this is where GitHub gets really confusing. Not only can you have repos, but you can have branches, which is like mimics of that repo. And then you can like do crazy things inside each of those and then merge them. And when we get to our projects, this is my favorite part, is because if you don't go through a merge conflict because you didn't push or pull something correctly, then that means that you're cheating. So we'll go over this. Sorry I went on that path because I thought there was a branch there, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit fork. I'm going to create a new fork. I'm going to say, yes, I want it. I'm going to keep it the same repository name so I don't forget what it really is. And then this thing right here for you guys, it's fine if you keep this. It's fine if you don't keep this. Since they only have the main branch, this doesn't matter. Yeah, development branch and production branch. Yep, that's exactly how I would do things. And when you guys get to your group projects, your liftoff, I will go over all of that. So right now you don't have. That's what I'm saying. GitHub is so big that if you're doing a basics of GitHub, even basics of GitHub is more than what you absolutely need to know right now. So I'm just trying to focus you in on what you need to know right now. You need to know, go to LaunchCode because they told you to. You hit the fork, and then you fork it. And now, if you look at the top, the URL, I know it's hard to see because it's a big screen or technically a small screen. You see that it's Coolcat 254 at the top. It is not LaunchCode anymore. That means that I am in the appropriate one. I think some of you, when you went to this code thing and you tried to clone it, make sure that when you clone it, it is yours. It's not anybody else's. Because then it'll point to theirs. And then whenever you try to push, they're not gonna let you push it. So make sure it's in your repo. So let's just check again. JS hello world. It's forked from here. So if I ever want to go back to there to see a reference of it, I can. But this is mine. I get to do it however I want. So I want it to be on my machine because I don't want to have to go here and because technically I can go here and I can say edit and I can say hello world and I can edit right in here, but there's no I can't run it here though. That's the hard part. There's no way to like test it or manipulate it in any way. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to exit out of this. I'm going to cancel changes because technically I can commit changes right here if I wanted, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go back to my code. Code are just files. I think that's the other hard part. Code isn't some magical thing. Code are just more or less text files that another program has to know what they are. So my computer by itself doesn't know what .js is. That's where I need VS Code or Node.js or a browser to know what that is. So always read the README. Okay. So I'm going to go right here. I'm actually going to clone this. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say copy to clipboard. Okay. Again, my desktop is super small for many of you to see. And I don't know how to make this bigger, but once I get to other things, I'll be able to make them bigger. My suggestion, especially if you are a Windows user, the mistake, the reason I hate Windows is OneDrive. If Windows could just remove OneDrive from everything I do, then I would probably be fine with Windows. But OneDrive is the worst thing that they've ever done, because all it does is eat up my resources, and then half the stuff, if it doesn't sync, then it starts causing errors. It does crap. It is the worst thing ever. So my suggestion is, OneDrive looks at your user profile and tries to sync your user profile, but it does not try to sync your C drive. So my suggestion, even if you've already got code wherever else, or if you want me to help you migrate this or whatever else, I would go on my C drive and create a LaunchCode folder on my C drive. And then some of you are like, well, I'll forget, or I don't know how to get there. Once you make this, you can always right click and do where is it? There's a shortcut. I don't do it, but some of you guys can help. But there's a way to make it shortcut to your desktop. I'm not used to Windows 11 as much, but you can pin to quick access. That would pin it just right over here so that you can just open up your File Explorer. There's other ways to make this easier to get to, which I strongly suggest. But if you put it on your C drive, you do not have to worry about OneDrive. So then I have LaunchCode. And inside LaunchCode, and of course, this is itty bitty. I'm not expecting you to be able to read this unless if you have a huge screen. So I'm going to read these off. These are just suggestions. These are not what LaunchCode says. One thing, eventually, you will want to be able to make your own code. So I called that fun. And I just have a folder so that whenever I get to the point that I know how to make code, I'm just going to put it in there. I'm going to also make a folder, because we're going to get to a graded assignment thing today. I'm going to make a folder called graded assignments, and all of my graded assignments are going to go in there. And then I'm going to have a folder called homework. Now, of course, you can add 10 different more folders if you want to. This is just my suggestion, not the absolute rule. Great question. Are you supposed to be doing this too? Here's what's going to happen. We have about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to take a break, because I am not going to talk for another hour without getting something to drink, going to the restroom, whatever else. So I am going to finish what I am doing here, and we are going to take a break. And then I'm going to show you this again here in a second. So if you are already here and you want to follow along with me, that's great. If you just want to watch and listen to the first time and then the second time, do this. That's fine too. Or if you're already set up, you don't have to. But that's up to you. So I'm going to put this in my homework folder. See how my homework directory is empty. I do this on Windows. I right click and I hit open in terminal. And I think I can make this bigger so you don't have to squint so bad. Yeah, there we go. Make that super big. So when you have this, I know I like to do something more extreme. This is PowerShell. So in Windows, something that I do think is important, if you go up, you can add different PowerShell things, but also what Windows has is it has this drop down where you can actually add Ubuntu. I've used that a few times where I've needed to. You can use PowerShell, you can use command line. I do some Azure stuff, so I have an Azure Cloud Shell. If you had GitHub Bash, if you had Git Bash, I bet you it would show up here as well. Windows Terminal is an amazing tool because it allows you to do so much. So that would be something I would investigate just a little bit. And again, just click things. I like just clicking and seeing how things work. But going back to this, then we're going to take a break. This is my directory. So if I do PWD, present working directory, it's going to tell me what path I'm in right now. In Windows, it automatically does this, but on Mac, it sometimes just says homework. It doesn't show you all the stuff before. So maybe you're in the wrong homework folder. If you have 10 folders called homework, maybe you don't know which one. So if you do this PWD, present working directory, it'll tell you the whole entire path of where you're at. So now that I know I'm in my homework folder, in my homework directory, this is where I do get, clone, and paste. And remember, the main thing I'm looking for is it has to have my username here, or else I'm pulling down the wrong one. Then I hit enter. And it says it got all these things. This is my technique. I think it might say this in the book, but whenever I first pull this down, instead of going back to my folder and seeing that it's a folder there and then opening it up in VS Code, as soon as you pull it down, you can actually do code. Code is VS Code code. So this says, hey, VS Code, I want you to do something. And then if I put space and then I put dot, this dot says, hey, open up where I am right now. So code says code stands for VS Code. Dot means is already programmed to open up right here. So whenever I hit this, it popped up on my other screen, but it popped up my VS Code. And as you can see, I'm in the homework in the JS Hello World. Right. Here's the problem. I actually don't want to be in my homework folder. This is a common mistake that I see. I don't want to be in my homework folder. I want to be in my JS Hello World folder. So when you clone something, it's going to make a folder for you, and you actually want to be in that folder, not the folder that you put it in. So whenever I do this, what I'm actually going to do is CD, change directory, and I know that it's called JS Hello World because that's what my thing is. What's cool is both Mac and Windows, if you start typing and there's only one different thing you can do, and you hit tab, so I'm going to hit tab, it's going to fill out everything for me. So I use that quite a bit. So I just start typing, I hit tab, I'm going to change the directory. Now I'm inside the repo that I just did. Now when I do code dot, it's actually going to put me in the correct location. So where you are in your VS Code, where you are in your terminal is very, very important. And you see here on the root level, I have this JavaScript file. I have the package.json. I have the README. I have a .getignore. I'm going to go over these 4 things, and then we're going to take a break. The .getignore. These are the things that when you send your repo back up to GitHub, it's going to ignore it. So sometimes there's just one thing in here. Sometimes there's multiple things, but it's going to ignore /node modules. Well, if you see, /node modules isn't even in here. So why is it there? We'll talk about that here in a second. Here's my JavaScript thing that says, hello. This thing here is where you guys have been asking a lot of questions. What is this thing? Well, when you have a JavaScript program, and that's where some people are saying, well, I did like this HTML, CSS, JavaScript bootcamp, and you don't always see this. That's because that's a separate purpose. This is running programs strictly in JavaScript. We are not running them on a website right now. This is for just like I can write a Python program, I can write a JavaScript program and have no user interface for it. That's what this is. LaunchCode has decided that instead of teaching you web design first and then JavaScript, they want to teach you JavaScript with basic programming first, ignore the web part, and then add in the web part. So if I heard some people say, well, I've already done some of this stuff, and you might add, but just know that that's a different philosophy, a different approach. We are just dealing with JavaScript, and this is basic programming. Like your next chapter is if statements. It doesn't matter if you're in JavaScript, Python, Java, whatever language, you're going to use if statements. Like that's what they're going to teach you first, is no matter what language you're in, these are conditionals. These are modules. These are classes. These are whatever, no matter what the language is. So just understand we will get to the web stuff, but that's later. This package JSON says it is declaring that these 4 files are a package, a set. And this package can be repackaged by running that npm install. So npm install looks at this package.json, and you see how it says that read line sync. This package says, hey, when you run this, I actually need this module. And if you don't have this module, it's probably not going to work. But I don't see that module up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a terminal. And once I open up VS Code, that was another question. Once I open up VS Code, I don't look at my other terminal ever. I do everything in this terminal. If you pick the right directory when you open up VS Code, then the correct directory is here. Again, I see several mistakes where you're actually at the homework folder, not the JS Hello World folder, the directory. And then this is where I do npm install. You also saw an IA do npm I. Install is so common that they said, hey, let's make a shortcut for it so that people don't have to type install all the time, and let's just put I. It runs the same command. It's just a shortcut for it. When I run this, what this does is it goes inside JS Hello World, so right here, and it looks for this package.json. And it installs any dependencies that's inside this. It said it added 1 package. I wonder what that package is. When you go over here, there's another thing that's added. Sorry, I forgot. I need to zoom in. All right. This one I know how to zoom into. So right here, do you remember how our .getIgnored said, hey, don't include this node modules, but it wasn't there? Once I run npm install, it creates node modules, and inside this node modules, this right here is the code that runs when you call readline sync. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to retype every single time I want to do an input from a user, this program over and over and over again in my program. So that's what modules are for. It's pre-built code that somebody said, hey, this is good to run along on its own. We are going to package it in a module so that nobody else has to rewrite this code. They can just use our code in their program. So that's what modules are. This readline sync is somebody else already made this. I mean, you can look at it, but I never do. And it's a module that now that it's in my JS Hello World, if this node modules are not in there, or this readline sync is not inside the node modules, when I would run this hello.json, it would not, well, because it doesn't actually call it. This one might actually work without me doing this because it doesn't actually use the readline sync. As you can see, my code doesn't say that. But if I put that readline sync in there, it would throw an error. That's how to tell if it's good. Inside the directory, node modules, inside the node modules is here. And for LaunchCode, they have done this package.json perfectly for you. So you don't have to, I could install this. I could do npm install readline sync. And this would install that module, but then it may or may not actually save it unless if it gets put in this package.json. So LaunchCode has done this for you. You don't have to manually do this. On the other hand, I do know that there's a couple advanced people in here that want to start messing with this on their own outside of LaunchCode's code. That's how you install that. Okay. I went over the 4 things. I'm going to read through the codes. How about this? There's a lot of different things. I think that we need to take about a 5-minute break. So it's Central Time, because I know there's non-Central people here. It's almost 6:30. Let's take a 6 or 5, well, now 5-minute break. At 6:35, we're going to come back. You'll know when I'm back by my screen being back on. So I'm going to go to the restroom real quick, grab a drink. I'll be back in like a minute or 2. And then I'm going to take a little bit of time to read through some of these chats, and then at 35 we'll start again. So it's fine if you kind of mute, or well, I guess you're already muted. Get off your camera and do that. I'm getting part of the way through these questions. I'm trying to respond in thread. Some of them are a little longer. Right. I'm going to keep going through this. I see that some people still aren't back, but I'm not going to go past this. I'm going to try to answer some of these questions in here. One of the questions were, what, like, for something as simple as what we did, do I need to do this npm install? So I'm actually going to delete the no modules. I'm going to delete this thing. So if you see here, there is nothing green, meaning added, or nothing yellow, meaning modified from my original thing. And some of you, I think it's source control here. Yeah, there's nothing there, right? I reverted it back to what we were doing. So at this point, the question was, do I need to run npm install to run what I have right here? And if I do this, I do not. It did not throw an error for me. I remember I deleted the modules here. I deleted everything I did. So this is back to the original that I got. If I run node and then my JavaScript file, it runs fine. And this is because it's an interpreted language. So it goes line by line. And if there's no errors, it just does what it needs to do. Just because my package says that I need read line sync, that doesn't mean that my JavaScript file actually does. So it just ignores that, and it just runs the file. Now, if I do the now you guys are putting me on the spot. That require this, and then I said, I think this is right. Hopefully this is right syntax. Again, on a daily basis, I program in Java, so my syntax is sometimes not the best. So I'm gonna, right here, I'm doing this. And now whenever I rerun this program, the other thing in VS Code, IntelliJ does auto saving. VS Code does not. How do I know that? Right here, there's like a white circle. If that white circle is there, that means that something is done but not saved. So if I hit Control S or Command S, now you can see that thing. This yellow here is because of GitHub. Normally, if you're just doing this without Git, this won't show here. But this says, hey, you've modified this file compared to the original. And so then whenever I run this, it throws up an error that says module not found. Cannot find this module. So when it hits this line on line 6 and it says, hey, go get this, it looked inside that node modules folder. That's where it looked. And since I don't have a node modules folder with that in there, it doesn't know what to do. So again, I could manually install it, or everything through LaunchCode is kind of prepped for you. So that's why I have to do the npm install. And what this will do is it'll give me back my node module, and I can verify inside the node modules that there's this read line sync. And now when I do my hello, it asks, what is your name? So somebody found an easy way to auto save in VS Code. So, I mean, I don't care. I'm just used to it now. But yes, that's personal preference. All those tips and tricks are usually personal preference. I'm fine if you guys turn on auto sync or auto save. Right. So again, if I don't have this readline sync, I can run my things without doing npm install. But if I require some kind of module, that's a common JS module, I have to install it per directory that I am using, that we're doing. Once we get to bigger projects, sometimes you can install it for the whole entire package, but for what we are doing, you are thinking that every single directory is its own project. So it needs to be installed inside this Hello World JS folder directory, and you have to have this node modules. And if you don't see this node modules in the same exact hierarchy as this Hello JS, it's not going to see that there. So you need to run npm install to get the node modules to do the right installation, and then you can rerun this. Ooh, good question. Semicolon, it does accept it without semicolon. I think there was a certain version that switched over, if I remember right. In my opinion, you might just go ahead and get used to it. I just didn't put it on there. I'd get used to putting it on there. The only reason I say that is because in Java, if you don't have this, it will throw an error. So in Java, you have to. Right. So now, most of you are like, this is a simple, easy one. I got this one. It's the next one that I have a problem with. So let's go back to a little bit of teaching, to the slides. Let us digest this a little bit, and then I'm going to do the same thing again with chapter 3 and 4. So I'm going to exit out of this. I'm going to exit out of this, exit out of this. And let's go back to our slides. Where are those at? Those are right here. Fine. So I just showed you how to use ls, cd, the fork and clone, npm install, and why we used it. Status. I didn't do status. Ooh, I didn't push it. Ooh, let's do that. Unfortunately, I don't think that that's your main issue. I will show that on the next one, I promise. But because of time, I'm just going to keep going. But I'll do this get status, add, commit, and push here in a second. And if you guys want to see it again, I don't mind showing you again, but I need to be mindful of our time. So chapter 3, this is where we actually started to get the project repo. We started to put comments, single line and multi-line. I am not going to show that because I thought that was pretty straightforward. The console, being able to do console.log and printing, doing spaces and commas and plus signs. I am not going to go over that in the lecture because of time. So if you have questions, definitely ask your assistants during studio, because it's super important. But I don't think I saw a single person ask me any questions about that. /t meaning tab, /n meaning new line when you're printing. Again, those aren't super important, but it's a good call out. And then debugging, I do want to go over this here in a second. So I will come back to this repo and do this for you. But let's just keep on going. So something else that has been super important is being able to ask for help appropriately. I think the people that have been asking for help, almost all of them are doing an amazing job. You're not just saying, I'm getting an error. And then somebody has to ask, well, what's the error? Where did you do this? Like, how did you get this? Like all those questions. So general rule, when you're reaching out, you need to say what you've done before that. Like what is actually working before the error. Like I pulled down my repo and I got that working, but whenever I ran npm install, it didn't. And then maybe what you're expecting. Well, I ran npm install and it should have, installed these modules, but instead I got this error. And then what does not work? It's not installing the module. So these are general rules for me, but if you can do this, including maybe sending a screenshot, those are always helpful. But before you do that, and many of you have been doing this, is you've been trying to Google it. Here's what I can tell you about Google. Google is all about how to Google is its own skill. And many of you might know how to do it for other things, but for computer science, for engineering, for JavaScript, it is a different skill sometimes to get what you want out of it. I'm not expecting you to be a master Google JavaScript person right now, but that is something that you will slowly start developing. Here's the fastest way to learn how to Google. Learn the vocabulary. Vocabulary is that common ground when you're saying, hey, I need this module rather than I need this code, because code's too vague. It'll help you shift out some of the stuff that doesn't help you at all. So make sure that when you're Googling, you're using appropriate vocabulary and descriptive vocabulary. But otherwise, I did want to show you this, how even myself, how I get through things is this rubber duck principle. I thought this would be good to kind of break apart our brains here. So rubber duck debugging, it is a thing. It's been a thing for several years. Like somebody wrote a book, it's somewhere in here. But the whole point of this is whenever your code is not working, the fastest way to be able to try to get it to work is to start explaining your situation. That's another reason why whenever you reach out to me, I want you to be able to explain it to me. What have you done? What are you trying to do? What is not working? I share this really funny example. When I first, so my backstory is I was a teacher for 14 years. I just got into software development about a year and a half ago. So I have not been developing at an enterprise level except for about a year and a half. Whenever I first got on board, my whole team was in San Jose. I was in office in Overland Park in Kansas City, and I didn't really have a lot of help. So there was one person that sat across the floor from me that was amazing. Him and I still got the coffee. You know, I consider him a mentor. He was my rubber duck. That's like with this shirt with programming therapists. Like I hope that I become anybody that needs it, their rubber duck, where what they do is they start to explain their problem. And what was hilarious is I would walk over to his desk with my computer in hand. I would look at him, and then I would just walk away back to my desk. And he knew exactly what was going on. As I was walking over to talk to him, I was thinking in my head, how am I going to explain this to him? He doesn't know what my code is. He doesn't know a lot of stuff. He knows Java very well, so I can ask him Java questions, but he doesn't know what I'm trying to do. How do I explain to somebody that knows code but has no clue what I'm trying to do? How do I explain to them to get help from them? And as I went through that and was explaining it to him, most of the time, I got my own answer. So I actually have a couple rubber ducks. I'm not going to show them off because the closest one to me is Halloween right now, but it's just a visual reminder. If you ever see a rubber duck somewhere on computer science, it's because you're supposed to, and it isn't just think, it's actually talk. You'll hear me talk to myself all the time. In my cubicle, I'm just sitting there talking. And one reason I like working from home is because I get to talk to myself even more. Please talk out loud. Type what you're trying to do out. And once you get good enough, that usually solves most of your problems. So this rubber duck, if you ever hear about it, talk about. I'm a big supporter of the rubber duck. Chapter 4, because Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 code, the examples are in the same code base. I'm going to talk about Chapter 4. Then I'm going to go back, grab the fork the repo, and then keep on going. So Chapter 4 takeaways, values. You need to know whenever I say value, that's actually not the variable name, but what I'm putting in the variable. Data types, there are two main ones that they talk about, strings and numbers. Strings are just characters, letters put together. We'll actually talk about other data types later. Type conversion, some of you were playing around with that. If I type the 2 in quotes, it's actually a string, it's not a number. But if I want to put it into a number, I can convert string numbers into numbers. Variable. So there's the declaration. You have to say that it's a variable. You can't just say name equals. Actually, in JavaScript, I think you might be able to get away with that. Do not do that, though, because most programming languages, you have to say let, or you have to declare that you're declaring a variable. So make sure that you get in the habit of declaring your variable. Let name equals. So assignment is that equals part. You're going to assign it, because I could just say let name. And what it does is it reserves in memory a spot for name, but it doesn't put anything in there. I have to assign it before it actually puts something in that slot of memory for the computer. So the assignment is, hey, I actually want to take the name and put it there. Initialization is whenever we do it for the first time. So when we say initialize a variable, it's usually the declaration with the assignment right at the beginning. And then being able to name variables. You need to be descriptive. If you say let x equals, there is very few times that I would ever accept a let x equals. And that's usually if it's a number and I'm dealing with an algebraic expression that x is the normal variable that they use. That's about it. Otherwise, you need to use words. Expressions and evaluation, those are just vocabulary words that you do need to know. Expressions are combinations of, 3 plus 2 is an expression. The evaluation is once that expression is ran, what's the answer to that expression? Operations, I said shorthand, I misspoke. It's complex operations, compound. There's a vocabulary. I will, the book says it right. I just didn't type it in right. But there are operations like, let's say I want to add 2 to a number. Instead of saying the number equals the number plus 2, I can say number plus equals 2. I don't think that was overly stressed. And again, that's not one that I read, like, that's not something that you have to memorize or do right now. That'll come up over and over again. So don't worry about that one right this second. And then, of course, the read line sync, everybody's favorite. So vocabulary, again, you need to know what value means. Value is what is being stored in your variable. Data type, we talked about string and number. Data type conversion. This keyword called constant. So there's let, I think it's on the next slide. Yeah. So I'll talk about that in a second. And then concatenate. That is a vocabulary word that just means join together. So the difference is if I'm going to add 2 numbers together, I'm going to say add, because whenever I say add, people think of math. When I use that plus sign with strings, I can't just say add hello plus name. People get confused. So I'm going to say concatenate, and that means add together, link together, but I'm usually talking about strings. So when I say add, it's often talking about like numbers, where when I say concatenate, that's dealing with strings, putting them together. Some other things, I think you can concatenate numbers and string. They need to be the same type or being able to convert them. So that's a weird one. Those are excellent questions to just sit down and do because they're easy to try out. So definitely those questions. That's how I learned how to program was, oh, I wonder if I can do this. And I just do it. Type it out. Type systems. So in JavaScript, you're seeing string and number, and it actually uses the keyword number, like that's a data type. Where in Java, number is not a data type. You have to have an int or a long or float or a double, or there's other versions of numbers, but number by itself is not a data type in Java. So each type system, each language has their own type system, and so you will have to memorize what those types are for whatever language you're dealing with. NaN, not a number. Crazy. That's what that stands for. Global variable that's thrown out there. We have not gotten to the point where I want to fully explain what a global variable is versus a local variable. So those are out there. You need to know that you've heard it before, but don't stress over that one. We'll talk about that one later. Variables. Back in the day, they used var for variable. That makes sense. But now they're using let. So you never should use var. That's kind of an older term. You need to use let because that's industry standard. Const is a constant. So constant means it doesn't change. So if I'm storing the number for gravity on Earth, I'm going to assign it as a const because it's never going to change. If I am assigning a speed limit on a certain highway in a certain section, that's going to be a constant because it's not going to change. Now, the speed that my car is actually going on that highway, that's not consistent. That's not constant, so I might use a let for that. So just those are the different things. Let allows you to change it throughout. A const is constant, it never changes. The other thing they talked about with variables is naming conventions. There's camel case. I see an example there where every word besides the first word is capitalized, but it's all squeezed together. They're called snake case. There's underline case. There's other words for it, but snake case. The reason I like snake case is because that's where Python uses snake case. So I can always associate, if I'm writing something in Python, they want that type of case. And then there's Pascal case, which they don't bring up a lot, but because we usually use camel case. So by default, I probably use camel case. But it also depends on what language, because if you write in Python and you use camel case, your other developers they'll like shun you. So just know certain languages have their own thing. Java uses camel case. JavaScript, because it's a beginner language, has been thrown out there. I've seen so many different things, but I think the most I've seen is camel case. So, and then also there's this thing called keywords. Every language has their own set of keywords that you cannot assign variables to. So just know that those are out there. If you ever see an error that says keyword something something and there's an error, it's often because you're using one of those keywords in a way that it's not supposed to. So like let. Let is a keyword. Java knows what let is. It has a reason to have it there. You can't say let equals to, because it won't know what you're talking about. Right. I was going to do the live coding earlier, but so every class, I'm just going to set this up. Every class I am going to do a live coding section. This is usually where I'm going to do examples. And originally when I was doing this presentation, I was going to do the live coding right at chapter 3, but now I'm going to go back to it because I promised you I would. So my live coding today is going over how to fork, clone, do all that kind of stuff with the JavaScript project, and then run through a couple of those examples. And I think that's probably where I'll end with the live coding, even though that's going to take up a large time. So let me go back to my link here. All right. So this JavaScript project, remember right now when I clicked on the link, this is LaunchCode Education. This is their repo. They don't want me to touch it. I need to bring my own repo, so I'm going to go over here and hit fork. When I hit fork, it'll tell me if I already have a fork, because you can only do it once. I do not, so I'm going to hit this. When I fork it, I'm going to make sure that I am the owner, because it's my personal repo now that I can push and mess up and tear up and do whatever I want to. And then I am going to keep the repository name the same, just because why not? I'm going to create the fork. This creates it in the remote, remember, but it does not put it on my local. So I need to get this down to my local so I can better use it. And the best way to do that is go here and clone. So I'm going to hit copy URL, the directory, and then I'm going to leave GitHub. I'm not going to touch GitHub again until I push my stuff, and it's mainly just for verification. I never really go to GitHub once I get it on my local. So then I'm going to go to my local. Again, there are multiple ways to do this. I really do like the terminal, but because some people were questioning it, I'm going to do it differently. So again, I'm going to tell you how I normally do it. Normally I'd go here on the homework. I would right click here and open my homework in terminal. And this is because I personally, not LaunchCode, not anybody specifically, I said, I want all my homework to live in this homework directory. So I'm putting it here. You can put it wherever you want to. And then I would do git clone and that. Well, I'm going to say that I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm going to go here and I'm just going to, let's go to VS Code. Let's do this as roundabout as possible so you can see that it doesn't really matter how you get there as long as you eventually get there. So I open up VS Code. It won't let me drag it over. Okay, here we go. Welcome. I'm not even in a folder, so I get to pick whatever folder I want. So I'm going to open up that homework folder. Again, it's LaunchCode homework folder. So this is where I'm going to put my stuff at. And my JavaScript hello world is already there, but I don't want that. What I want to do is I want to put my other one right here. So at this point, I can actually use VS Code's terminal. Do you see how it says PS? That's PowerShell. If you looked at my other terminal, my other terminal, it says PS. Oh, this one's in the wrong one. This is where I'd have to do like CD. So I'd have to move around here. I would, if you, especially if you're a Mac user, because if you're a Mac user, usually this is a little bit easier. Windows has so many good GUI things in Windows that you don't need this. But like I changed directory. Dot means go backwards one. I'm still not back in my C drive, so I went backwards one more, and then I did CD. And I don't know if you saw me. But I did my tab. So I did CD. I started typing launch code and I hit tab and it filled out launch code for me. Then I knew it was the homework. So I started typing homework and then I hit tab and it filled it out. And now I'm in my homework. So these are the same spot now. It does not matter which terminal you're in. It matters your location. Your computer needs to know where you're going. So I'm in my homework, and this, you can put it wherever you want to, but I'm going to put in my homework. I'm going to go right here. I'm going to say get clone. I'm going to paste, and remember, I'm looking specifically for my username there. If I don't see my username and then my repo name, then I'm cloning the wrong one. Once I hit here, I don't know if you saw it to the side, it made, you see I made a new one? Did I grab the wrong? I 100% grabbed the wrong. Nope, it's right here. I was looking at the wrong one. JavaScript projects. This is where things get really confusing because just like you saw me kind of question myself, which I do often, I didn't know exactly where I was at. So I had to recalibrate where I'm at. And this hello world is not where I want to be. I want to be in this JavaScript project. So what I'm going to do, there's a couple different things. I would just reopen up folder and find where I want to be, which is a JavaScript project, which is right here. And I'm going to select this folder, this JavaScript project folder. I know that you can't see that because it's itty bitty, but just believe me, it's the JavaScript project folder. And then here's, and so at the root, when I say root, this is what I'm talking like at the base, at the very bottom or top, however you want to see this. At the very top here, it's projects. The only thing in there is project. So if I'm doing the one you guys had most trouble with, data and variables. Let's say I want to do this data and variables, and I wanted to mess around with some of these examples or the exercises. So you have two different locations here that you could go. If you look inside the chapter examples, you will see a package.json. Here is another tip that you could do. Instead of being in your JavaScript project, if you know that this is going to be where you're going to be, you could, I think there's a way to open up in here, find in folder. What I do is I do this open in integrated terminal. This is my little tip or trick, so I don't have to do all that CD stuff. If this is where I want to be, I say open an integrated terminal. And then right here, if you notice, the chapter examples is the directory that I'm in right here. So I'm going to go. So for next time, like next class, we are doing, I think it's Boolean and conditionals, and I think another one. So on like tomorrow, you guys are going to open up the same exact JavaScript project. You're going to open up this. You're going to go to exercises, and you could just right click here, say open an integrated terminal, and it's going to put you in Booleans and conditions exercises, right where I put you there. You could also get used to doing the CD and moving around. PowerShell, do you see how there's two? I can actually switch back and forth. Just don't get confused on which one you're on because it'll open up a new one for every single one. So again, I'm going to redo this. I just downloaded this. I'm going to go to the data and variables. I don't want to open up that. I want to open up the chapter examples so I can play with them. And I'm going to hit open an integrated terminal. And then I'm going to, because there's a package.json, the first thing I'm going to do is npm install. it's going to add that one package, and it's going to put that node module folder right there. Some people wanted to know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, package lock specific versions. So it still takes the package JSON, but this says, hey, I want you to have a dependency of this, but you can have whatever you want above this version. So whenever it goes here, I guess it did lock it at that same thing. So when you go here, it may or may not be that same exact version. It is that version. Do not worry about the versioning. That's too much for what you're doing. Install NPM globally. NPM by itself. Okay, so I guess I'll back up. Little step back from here. Node.js is just this interpreter. I'm going to state things that if you Google will not say the same thing, but I am trying to put it at the level that you guys are at. Right? So just know that I'm not always speaking right. Right now, I'm not saying exactly everything that's truthful as much as comprehension. Node.js is just a big interpreter. So whenever I write these JS files and I say, hey, Node, go look at these JS files and make it so that my computer understands them, Node says, okay, I know how to do that. That's Node. So anytime you run Node, it's like, hey, interpret, and then you put your JavaScript file and it's interpreting that file so the computer can go do it. NPM is Node Package Manager. What they said, you can go to GitHub, and I've had to do this several times. You guys won't, but I've had to go to GitHub and install modules directly from GitHub. That's a pain. You don't have to go searching around and making sure that you install it, and put it in the right place, and do all this kind of crazy configuration. So what they said, Node, if you're a normal module that everybody uses, we're going to make this Node Package Manager that will do all that stuff for you. All you have to do is tell it what you want, and it'll go get it. It'll put it where it needs to be, and then it'll work. And so NPM is Node Package Manager. It goes and grabs that Node module, that read line sync, and puts it exactly where you said to put it, where it's hopefully where you need it, so that directory can now interpret. So now Node, when it runs your JavaScript file, it can grab the libraries that it doesn't have by default. So that read line sync. So NPM Node Package Manager, all that does is it packages your modules and puts them where they need to be. Hope that explained. Right. So when you talk about globally, NPM is installed globally, or it should be. When you install Node from the website, it should install Node and NPM globally. Now, if you're talking about this exact read line sync, no, it does not install that globally. It installs that locally, and you only want to install it locally because let's say we're talking about enterprise. So everything we're doing, we have to at least eventually get to scale. So in an enterprise application, I might have 200 modules that also have dependencies on other modules. And if I install that globally, what that means is my program then tries to grab all these modules that it may not even need, and it takes up space, it takes up time, it takes up all this kind of stuff. So you need to get used to running a very small, productive, only installing the things you need to for whatever you need. And that's what this does. It puts it locally so that these JavaScript files, so right where my Node modules is, the Bruce's beer, the critical, the more, the read line, the type, all of these now have access to this Node module, this read line sync, because they're in the same directory. And Node only looks at that directory right now. That's where you guys are at. On the other hand, if I go to my exercises, if I do this exercise and put a read line in here, it won't know what to do. On the other hand, that's what I'm saying about LaunchCode. LaunchCode, nowhere in here does it say grab something from the user. So if you go into this folder or this file and try to do read line sync, it's not going to know because you haven't installed the read line sync module to be able to do that. And again, there's ways to do that. that's above what you absolutely need to know. So if you're more advanced, go Google it. If you're right with us where you need to be, LaunchCode is giving you everything. So for instance, by Thursday, you're supposed to do this booleans and conditionals. I think you actually have 2 chapters, but this is the more important one in my opinion. When you get to this, if you look inside here and there's no read line, then you don't need it. There's no read line. You don't need it. There's no read line. So you don't need it. That's why they did not put a package.json on here. And when you do these exercises, you will not need to do npm install. When you do the studio next week, none of this says grab information from the user. You will not need to do npm install, and you will not need read line. All right. So the question is, how often do I need to do this? And if you do npm install, even though you've already done it, it's not going to hurt anything. So if you want to do, as long as you're in the right directory, you want to do npm install every single time you look at this data variable chapter examples, and you want to do npm install every single time, go at it. How I tell is the node modules there or not? Because if this folder's there, I don't need to do it again, because it knows where to look. It has the information it has. Right. I see some questions. I'm trying to figure out which is the best way to do this. I'm going to show the Git stuff right now. So I have this JavaScript project. Here's the other thing that I have seen. So I want to exit out of this. If you want to go inside here and say, I only want to see data and variables and my chapter example, if you have not done this, I would strongly suggest, but on my machine on Windows, I have this thing called Open with Code. I know it's super hard to see or read that. I'm just telling you what I'm hovering over right now. It says Open with Code. Whenever I installed VS Code, it was a little checkbox that said, is this okay that we put this on this? And I said yes, and I use it all the time. So I'm going to say Open with Code. When I do this, there's a pop-up. I'm hoping it pops up, so I'm not a liar here. Yeah, somebody asked this. They said a Git repository was found in the parent folder, meaning this by itself is not a Git repository, but there was one in a parent. So further up, it saw, hey, this is part of a Git repo, but this by itself is not. And if I would have hit yes, and if you go over to source control, I do want this. I want this Git JavaScript projects, because then what it'll do is anytime I mess with just what I'm doing here, it's going to link that all together. So you could, instead of opening up the whole entire thing, open up just the folder you want. As long as you select that it's okay and click over here on source control and make sure that the Git sees each other, then you can go just directly into the folder. And in my opinion, that's probably what I would do, just so that I stay focused on exactly what I need. Now, let's say right here, more on strings. I'm going to make a change right here. I'm going to save it. Okay. You can see that I've updated some things, modified some things. There's some node module stuff here. Now I want to push it back to Git. Oh, the other thing, some of you are talking about the run and debug. Okay, there's so much stuff to talk about. On the run and debug, my suggestion is for right now, just run it in the terminal. If you do run and debug, which is perfectly fine, you have to click a couple more things, such as I'm going to run this more on strings. I'm going to hit run and debug. It'll say what debugger. Great question. If you're dealing with Node, just hit Node. And what it does is it prints these out. So type of this is a string, but if I get rid of the quote and rerun this, run and debug, now the top one is a number instead of a string. So yes, you can do this. I'm not actually, I either way, whatever you like to do, whatever gets you to what you want. Now, here's the other reason I would use the debug though. So if I'm just running my program really quick, I use the terminal, say node, JavaScript, run it. It's super fast and easy for me. This thing, to be honest, is a little bit too heavy, except for, I'm going to go over this next time. This is something that if you're advanced, pick up. If you're not advanced, don't worry about this. But if you hover over these things, there's these little red breakpoints. I think I'm big enough, right? Oh, too big. Yep, I was big. So this red breakpoint here, what the debug part, not the run part. So if I go here and I say node more on strings, nothing happened. It just did my number string. The power of the debug is if I hit this run and debug and I set a breakpoint, it actually stops. So if you're on your debug console, it actually stops. It ran this first line and it said it's a number. And then this little thing here says, hey, don't run this line until I say it's okay. Again, I'm going to show this later. This should not be your, if you stress out about this, you're thinking about the wrong things. Okay? I just wanted to show it and then I'm getting off of it. But then what you can do here is you can say, continue on. This means continue on. This says go to the next line. So then it's going to go line by line. So that's string. And I'm clicking on my mouse to go on to the next thing. So the debugger is huge, powerful. I will spend more time on this later. But I just wanted to show it, a preview of it. That's the only reason I use the run and debug is when I'm actually trying to debug. If you're just trying to run, I think running this terminal is the fastest way to get what you want. Personal preference again. Again, let's go back. We have this GitHub thing here. There's all these modified and updated things. And you can use the GUI here and say commit. You can. I would strongly suggest you to start getting used to Git in the command line because VS Code does it one way, IntelliJ does it another thing. Whenever we do our group project and put everything together, we're going to have to do different things. So I do want you to get used to these commands in the command line, which is git add. So what this is doing is it's adding everything that you see on the left-hand side here. It's going to say, okay, these are good to start adding these. You will see lots of warnings. This thing here, if you Google this, is the difference between Windows and Mac. You will never see this on a Mac, but Windows, when you use tab on Windows versus tab on a Mac, forgot the name of it. However, the computer interprets that is actually different. So LF and CRLF are different codes for the computer to know what kind of tab you use. So if you ever see that, do not worry about that. So this is saying, did you see how all of these switch to add? So anything new will now switch to add. And what I can do is at any point, get status does not change anything. So get status you can run as million times as you want to. It's not going to change anything, but it sometimes gives me good information. So this says I'm on my main branch, which again, we'll talk about branching way later. Do not worry about that. Your branch is up to date with this, meaning my remote doesn't have anything more than what I have locally. That's what that means. It doesn't mean that locally and remote are the same because obviously I changed some things. But what this means is that the remote doesn't have random things that I need to bring down. But it does say here that these are things that are on my machine that I want to check over. On the other hand, if I do push right now, I have not told it to lock it in. I said, these are things I want to review. I want to keep these kind of as a secondary thing, but these aren't committed yet. I'm still messing with them is really what it is. Make sure that you know about these, but I'm still messing with them. That's the git add, is so that Git can see what you're doing, but it is not storing what you're doing yet. That's where you got to do the git commit. I would always suggest doing a -m, which does a message, and typing your message. I would always do this because when you look back on it, these will start stacking on each other. So in my opinion, once you get done with an exercise, you could say, finish chapter 3 exercises. is your message, whatever. This will stay forever on your repo so that you know what you did. So I'm going to commit that. And it said it created all this stuff. And if you see over here on my GUI part of this, I don't have any changes on my local machine to itself. This is not saying that my remote's different. It's saying that locally, I said everything is good, commit these, lock these in. So right now, these things are locked in locally, but they're not locked in remotely. So if I do a get status, now it's going to say, hey, your branch actually has more than your origin main. It has one more commit. Now, commit can mean anything, right? It's just a change. So your branch is ahead of this by one commit. It is perfectly fine if this is 2 or 3 or 4 commit. If it says ahead, that means that it's going to be easy to push up because all you're going to do is push up those commits. If you ever see this say behind, that means that there's actually a commit on your remote that's not here. I don't think I've seen anybody have that problem yet, but I just want to call that out. If it says your branch, your local branch is ahead of that, then that's fine because then you're going to just push those commits right up. So I'm going to say get push, if I could spell. And what this is going to do is it's going to take just that one commit and push it up to GitHub. And if it does it right, you should see more or less the success here. And it says you went from your local main to your remote main. And so now when I go to GitHub, and I should be able to, maybe, yes, it should be this link right here, which it is. It points me back. This is the thing that I forked from, but remember, I'm on my repo, my Coolcat 254. And if I look here, it says 1 minute ago, I made a commit. And if I click on this thing here, it'll actually show me all the changes. Here's all the files that I did something with. So right. Yes, the last question is, once I get here, what is the link that LaunchCode wants you to put in Canvas? I hope I don't misspeak on this. This link here will be the same link for the rest of this unit. I know that sounds weird, but again, let's go back to the purpose of this course. Is the purpose of this course for you to check in your code, for your teacher or your IA to look over it and give you a grade? No. The purpose of these is for you to do them. And what you are doing when you type in even though it's the same URL, when you put this URL in the grade book, you are telling us that you have completed it and you have a basic understanding of it. Even if you're not an expert at it, you are telling me when I look at your grade that you have tried this, you don't have any questions, any major questions, and you're good to go. I am not. Nobody's going to look through this and say, oh, did you do this one little thing? Or did you mess up on this? Or did you whatever? That's not the purpose of this. The purpose is to say, for you to tell us, I don't have any questions. Here's my code. Again, if you submitted a link to a specific part of the repo, again, I hope that LaunchCode doesn't want me not to say this, but we're not looking at it. We're not. This, again, all it is a checkbox for us to say, are you caught up on your assignments? Are you not? Do you need help? That's what it is about. It is not about going in and checking your code because we will not look at your repo until you ask us to do that. That's just not part of it. You have to be self-initiative enough to stay on top of things and ask questions whenever you have them. We aren't going to go look in this. So again, whatever link you put in there, nobody's going to know. And if you do want us to check your repo, what I would do is ask your IA and be very specific, because they have too many things that they're dealing with to look just at yours specifically. So come with questions. Hopefully I timed this just perfectly. I don't think I have enough time to show you the example of the project, the liftoff. There we go, liftoff project. I will do that next time, so that you guys can see that. I guess there are two more things. Hold on, I'll go back to my slides because I have them in my slides. All right. So again, normally these slides will look the same every time. They're going to look boring. Hopefully you guys don't think my voice gets too boring and you guys can pay attention, but we'll do live coding every single time. Usually I'm going to spend a lot of time looking through this. I unfortunately do not have a lot of time right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to respond back to them. As you guys go to Studio, I'm going to look through the lecture chat and start to answer some of them that way. And if there are any key ones, I'll either address holistically or I'll bring up during next lecture. So don't worry. The other things that I did want to talk about that somebody brought up, there's the GitHub auth. Like, how do you auth into GitHub? That's a whole separate conversation. I wish I had more time to go into it. But if you are having 100% issues with it, reach out to your IA and reach out to me. But if you're at least being able to get it up there, but it's being annoying, just deal with it for a second. I will try to talk about it next time, but to be honest, it's more individual. And then how to use Discord and study rooms. Here's my suggestion. You guys can do whatever you want to. When you get online, I would love to see more of you when you get online. I can see on Discord that you're online. Now, some of it's because you're playing games or whatever else, but if you are online, I would suggest, if you're open to other people joining you, open up one of the study rooms. It's a voice channel. Open up a voice channel and just sit there, and or post somewhere to say, hey, I'm going to be online at 2 o'clock. Anybody want to join me? If you are Eastern, make sure that most people know that you are Central. So there is a time thing there. But if you're just bored and you're like, hey, I'm going to sit down for an hour and a half, open up one of those study rooms. I would suggest many of you just get on there and then start talking. That's my suggestion. Take it or leave it. Now, we need to verify this, and then we're going to go to Studio. Oh, the other thing was attendance code. Attendance code is given in Studio most of the time. So I know for today, your IAs will have the attendance code for you. But make sure, if you can't do one of these, that you are talking to your IA. Commit into code, like the / or the multi-line or single line comment. You can log the console. You know what variable types are, declarations, assignments, etc. You know how to use the read line sync. You now know, better understanding, you still need to probably practice a little bit, the fork, clone, commit, and push. If some of you are asking, well, how do I do this again because I already forked? I would go back to that first one, not the JavaScript projects one, because hopefully you've done some code in that, but that original one from chapter 2, that hello world one. Delete your repo, start fresh, and see if you can go through that whole entire process again on that small repo, just so you know how to do that. And then lastly, you know how to run code that LaunchCode is given. Remember, the read line sync only works if you do the npm install, but LaunchCode has put those package JSONs in there for you. You're not expected to know how to do that by yourself. Right. That's a lot of information. Usually I'm not going to talk this long. So hopefully, remember, if you can't do some of those, please reach out. Expectations before Thursday, there is one more thing. There's always something else. Okay, so Thursday, just like normal, there's a reading, there's exercises, there's technically 2 of them, and then those are due before class. On Thursday, you'll get another attendance code. There'll be another studio before you sign off on Thursday. That's normal, every time. There is a graded assignment number 1, part 1, due on Thursday. Now, I kind of like how they did this. Instead of having assignment 1 and it's just due on a locked date, they're doing part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. So if you are a day late on turning in this graded assignment, do not worry about this one, because we understand. But for those of you that are already understanding this, I would try to get this assignment one, this part one, done before Thursday, or before class, if you want to ask questions, or I think it's technically due before midnight Central Time on Thursday. That's an additional thing. Now, with the graded assignments, I'm not going to go over everything because you just learned how to fork, how to clone, how to do all that stuff. But since it is a part one, when you run your test, when you push it up to GitHub, an action will happen. But since it's not the whole thing, your check mark will not be there. It will be an X because it's only part one. It also gives you a screenshot in graded assignment part one to know how many tests are going to be passed, and there should be 6 of them. If you have your 6 tests passed and you don't have any questions, just submit it and you're good to go. Otherwise, some of those questions are great to post between now and Thursday. But there is, I just wanted to make you very aware that there is technically a graded assignment, and those graded assignments, not at part one, but at the very end, will be graded, and you will be either asked to redo it or add to it or whatever else. But that is going to be graded, pass or fail. The exercises, once you turn them in, nobody really looks at. But the graded assignments, your IAs will look at those, will look at the code and give you evaluations back, hopefully. If they don't give you an evaluation, that means that everything's good. All right, great question. Studio is hopefully whatever we've done. I know you don't see it, you're just going to have to be patient. This studio is not a technical one. You're going to do goal setting, etc. Sometimes studios are like that, where it's goal setting. It's something that is important, but it's not code. Next studio will be, it'll have a set of instructions. You're going to set these variables. You're going to run these commands. You're going to do these if statements. You're going to do this stuff. And what Studio is supposed to do is put you in a small group of 15 to 20, so that when you get into your study session or with your breakout room, you guys are helping each other as a small group get through that studio right then, right there. It's not on your own. It's together as a class to make sure that all of you are on the same page, and then each of you have an IA overseeing that whole process. So it's more hands-on, but it's a small group. You guys should be working together, completing studio during studio. I do strongly suggest at least reading the studio before studio, but do not start the studio before studio unless if you're told to. It's made to do during that hour. Well, now it's going to be an hour, but usually it's an hour and a half all together. Correct. If you don't turn part one in until Friday, nobody's going to be yelling at you. Recorded lecture will be posted. I hope that you guys have seen when I post something, I make it available. So I don't know where yet, but I will inform you where the studio is going to, or where the recording is going to be. Again, I'm going to go through the lecture chat. There was so much there that I'm going to go through there. And as you guys in studio respond back, do I have another page? Right. Normally I'm going to have this. I'm going to ignore this right now, but usually I tell you a starting time. I would take a break, a very short break. Actually, let's go to the studio first, check in with your IA, and then see if they'll let you take a 5-minute break from there, just so that if you have technical difficulties getting to your studio, we can help that while other people are taking a break. I definitely will give you a slideshow. I'm not seeing anything besides thanks, which this is what I do. I love doing it. I'm hoping to help you out even more. Yep. I'm going to stop the recording now and then be able to answer any technical, like, studio stuff.